The night the rivers stood still, the water that refused to flow. Welcome to sleep with myth. Close your eyes and let the world fade away. Tonight we drift beyond time, where gods dream and stories remember their light. The night the river stopped breathing. The river had always been alive. Even in winter, when frost gripped its edges like pale fingers, its heart still beat beneath the ice. Slow, steady, ancient. The villagers of Haruvale believed the river dreamed for all of them. Its murmurs soothed their sleep. Its currents carried their prayers. And its waters reflected the stars when the sky forgot to shine. But tonight, it did not move. No whisper, no ripple, no breath. Lanterns trembled in the hands of gathered villagers. As they stood along the silent banks, their faces reflecting both worry and disbelief. Water should never be still. Not like this, not even under the coldest sky. But the river lay flat as glass, a dark mirror of the moonless heavens. And only one person understood why. A girl named Lyra, small, barefoot, wrapped in a too large cloak, stood at the water's edge, her eyes wide with something more than fear. She could hear it, a whisper beneath the stillness, a voice too soft for anyone else. Find me. The sound trembled like a memory, a fragile thread stretching across the frozen silence. Lyra's breath hitched. She stepped closer to the unmoving water, feeling the cold seep through her feet like needles of ice. The villagers behind her murmured, "Don't go near it. It's cursed. The river gods are angry." But Lyra didn't hear them, because the voice called again, clearer, closer. Find me before the world forgets. And though she didn't know it yet, this was the moment everything would change. For her, for the river, and for every sleeping god who waited beneath its depth. The river's surface shivered. Not a ripple, but a sound like cracking bone, echoing up from the depths below. Lyra gasped and stumbled back. A line of thin, glowing light appeared along the center of the river. Not warm, not cold, but something else. Something alive. The villagers panicked, pulling away from the bank. But Lyra stepped forward again, mesmerized. Because beneath the glowing crack, something moved. Slowly, deliberately. Not water, not stone, not fish. Something with shape. Something sleeping. Something waiting. And as the glow brightened, the whisper returned, no longer soft. "Lyra, you hear me? You must come." Lyra's heart pounded. "How do you know my name?" she whispered. The river answered not with words, but with a pulse of faint light that flowed from the crack, straight to her feet. It brushed her toes, warm, comforting, alive. The villagers cried out, "Step away, child. Don't touch it. You don't know what that is." But the river had chosen her. She felt it, the way one feels the wind before it rises, or the way the stars seem to brighten when someone remembers their story. The voice grew clearer. "If I fade, the world will forget its dreams. If the river sleeps forever, time will stop flowing. Lyra didn't understand. Not yet. But she knew this. If she didn't answer the call, no one else could. She stepped into the river, and the light embraced her like a long-lost memory. When Lyra stepped into the unmoving river, she expected cold. Instead, the water met her skin like memory, soft, warm, and trembling, as if it were waking from a long, dreamless sleep. The villagers gasped behind her, but their voices faded quickly. As the river's glow thickened around her ankles, hugging her like liquid moonlight, the world fell into a deep hush. Even the wind stopped moving. Only the whisper remained. "Come deeper, before my voice disappears." The glowing child stirred in its sleep, sending ripples of faint silver across the surface. But the ripples didn't move outward. They froze in place, caught like shattered mirrors. The voice grew weaker. "You hear me now, but soon you won't." Lyra pressed her palm harder onto the surface. "How do I help you?" The river hesitated. Then, "A name. A name I have lost. Find it and I will rise again." Lyra blinked. "A river needs a name? All things that flow do. Without one, I cannot remember my path, cannot move, I cannot live." Lyra thought of the villagers, whispering prayers into the water, tossing flowers into its currents, believing the river carried their wishes. But none of them knew its true name. They had only ever called it the river. "What is your name?" Lyra whispered. Silence. Not because it refused, but because it could not answer. Lyra swallowed. "Then I'll find it for you." The first test of stillness. The light pulsed once, a soft tremble of gratitude. But then the river darkened. The glow beneath her feet tightened and shrank, like a frightened breath. Something moved in the depths. Not gentle, not warm, not memory. A shadow, long and thin, slid through the blackness, like a serpent carved from night. The river's voice shook. "Hurry, before it wakes." Lyra's pulse raced. "What is that?" The whisper faded into trembling silence. For the first time, the river did not answer. It was afraid, the guardian of forgotten things. A second shadow rose from the deep, this one wider, its outline jagged, broken, as if made from pieces of other shadows, stitched together by darkness. Eyes opened beneath the surface, pale, hollow, unblinking. They didn't look at Lyra. They looked at the glowing child. Protecting it? No. Hunting it. The silence around her deepened, until even her heartbeat seemed too loud. Lyra stepped back, and the surface shivered beneath her. Not cracking, not melting, reacting, like something below was rising toward her. The whisper returned, faint, desperate. "Do not let it touch me, or I will forget forever." Lyra clenched her fists. "Then what do I do?" The river answered with one final trembling thread of sound. "Wake me." The first sound in a silent world. The shadows rushed upward. The surface broke. A jagged hand of darkness reached from the water, its fingers dripping with frozen nothingness. Lyra's breath caught in her chest, but something changed. For the first time, since the river fell silent, a single drop moved. A droplet of water fell from the frozen air and struck the surface with the softest sound, plip, a sound so small, yet so impossible, that the darkness recoiled, because that single droplet held something the shadows feared. Flow. Lyra felt the truth bloom in her chest. If she wanted to wake the river, she needed more than courage. She needed motion, memory, flow. The river could not speak anymore, but she knew the path. She had to stir the stillness. She had to move the unmoving. She had to become the flow the river had lost. Lyra inhaled deeply, and she stepped forward, straight into the rising shadow. The moment the world held its breath. When Lyra stepped forward, straight into the rising shadow, the river did something it had not done in days. It shivered. A faint vibration pulsed beneath her feet, like the slow exhale of something too weak to breathe. The shadows recoiled slightly, their edges rippling as if the idea of movement was a forgotten language they almost remembered. Lyra felt the water beneath her begin to soften, not flowing, not melting, but loosening its grip on stillness. The river was trying to move, trying to remember, trying to breathe again. The whisper in her mind trembled weakly. Don't stop, not now. And so she didn't. Lyra took another step toward the frozen dark hand clawing upward. The air around her thickened, cold as winter stone, heavy as the moment before a storm breaks. But fear didn't pierce her. Instead, she felt something stranger, a gentle tug, a pull from the glowing child beneath the surface. A plea, a wish, a memory asking to be saved. The touch that was almost a memory. The shadow's jagged hand of darkness stretched higher, its fingers bending unnaturally as if searching for something it once held long ago. Lyra raised her arm, not to strike, not to defend, but to touch. The villagers would have screamed. Anyone else would have run. But Lyra felt the river's heartbeat in her veins. Weak, exhausted, yet still alive. When her fingertips brushed the edge of the shadow, a shock of cold rushed through her chest, a pain sharp enough to steal her breath. For a moment she saw it, a world without movement, a sky without stars, rivers without names, dreams without light, a world where silence had won. The shadow wasn't darkness. It was absence, the absence left behind. When something that was meant to flow is forced to sleep for too long. Lyra gasped and snatched her hand back. The shadow recoiled with her, as if her pain injured it too. The glowing child beneath the water stirred, and the river whispered, "It remembers me, but not what I was." The question the river could not ask. Lyra knelt, her palm against the glowing surface. The crack of light beneath her feet widened just slightly, a thin beam of warm radiance rising around her, like a fragile shield. The shadows hissed at the light, curling backward, their hollow bodies shuddering, as if the glow was dissolving them. Lyra whispered through trembling breath, Are you trying to protect me or keep me away? The child-shaped spirit did not answer, not with words. Instead, the glow pulsed once, soft and sorrowful. Lyra felt the meaning bloom in her thoughts. Both, she understood. If the shadow touched the river's sleeping heart, all memory would be lost. Not just the rivers, but every story of flow, every path water ever carved through the world. The river wasn't only holding still, it was holding the world in place. And the shadow was the weight of everything forgotten. The second shadow shifted beneath the surface, the broader one with hollow, broken edges. It rose higher, its jagged form trembling with unnatural hunger. Yet it didn't reach for Lyra. It reached for the child of light. The river's whisper shook. If it touches me, I will forget my name forever. Lyra grabbed a fallen branch half submerged near her. A weak piece of driftwood softened by days of unmoving water. It was useless as a weapon, but it was something she could move. She swept it through the air and slammed it into the surface. The sound, even small, even soft, echoed. A ripple formed. A ripple moved. Only a few centimeters. Only for a heartbeat. But it moved. The shadow convulsed violently, its hollow body shredding at the edges, as if the ripple scraped through it. The river gasped within her thoughts. That hurt it. Lyra's pulse raced. You're scared of the flow, she whispered to the shadow, because you can't follow it. A crackle of shivering cold passed over her. The shadow's form thinned, shuddering in silent fury. The song of a single ripple. Lyra did it again. Another sweep, another splash, another ripple that dared to live. The surface responded, tiny tremors rolling outward, like a heartbeat rediscovering itself. The shadows writhed in the disturbed water, their bodies distorting, losing shape, losing hunger. But they did not disappear. They gathered, merged, and from the merging darkness, a single towering form rose, a shape like a river turned upside down, a body of nothingness, where water should have flowed. It leaned over Lyra, silent, vast, ancient. The river whispered, weak but urgent, do not run. It knows your fear. It does not know your courage. Lyra stood tall, her knees shaking, her fists clenched at her sides. I'm not your enemy, she whispered to the towering shadow. And you're not mine. The shadow froze, its hollow, eyeless face tilted, as if listening, because movement, real movement, had returned to the river, even if only in the smallest way. The promise in the water. The child beneath the surface opened its eyes. Two tiny lights, soft as distant stars, glowed up at her. The river's voice, though faint, felt like the gentlest touch on her thoughts. You cannot wake me alone, but you can remind me why I must wake. Lyra knelt again, placing both hands on the glowing crack. She closed her eyes, and she did something she had never done before. She spoke to the river, not with words, not with fear, but with a promise she didn't fully understand. I'll find your name, I'll return it to you. I'll make you remember. A warmth spread through her palms. The glow beneath her brightened, and the frozen surface finally moved. Not fully, not freely, but it moved. A ripple, a breath, a heartbeat. Enough. The shadow screamed without sound, its towering form twisting in agony. As the flow brushed its hollow chest, it recoiled. It shattered into smaller fragments, pieces of darkness fleeing back into the deep. The river whispered one final time, so soft she had to lean in to hear. Hurry, Lyra, before the world forgets me again. And as the glow dimmed, and the shadows retreated into the blackness below, Lyra realized she had woken the river, but only enough to begin its resurrection. Its true name still slept somewhere far beyond the water, and the journey to find it had only just begun. The path that appeared when the river breathed, when the shadows shattered into the silent water, and the glowing crack dimmed to a soft silver. Lyra stood alone in the middle of the river. That was no longer entirely asleep. Not awake, not yet, but breathing. A faint current brushed her ankles, like fingers tracing their first motion in centuries. The water stirred, hesitant and shy, as if relearning the idea of direction. Lyra looked down. The child of light, the river's spirit, watched her from beneath the surface. Its eyes, bright and trembling, felt like the reflection of a distant moon, waiting to rise. You woke a part of me. The whisper reached her again, thin as spider silk, fragile as frost. But the rest of me lies far from here. The crack of light beneath her feet shifted suddenly, stretching forward, into a single glowing line that cut through the dark water, like a path painted from the heart of a star. Lyra swallowed hard. You want me to follow this? A gentle pulse answered. Yes. The road of remembered water. The path of light extended deeper into the river, toward the farthest bend where the trees thickened, and the forest swallowed the horizon in mist. Lyra stepped forward. The river held her weight, solid beneath her steps, but only along the glowing line. If she strayed even a hand's width, the water softened dangerously, rippling with sleeping uncertainty. The world around her changed as she followed the luminous road. The riverbanks dimmed. The lanterns of the villagers faded behind her. The night thickened into a gentle, velvet darkness, and above her, the sky deepened into a color that did not exist during ordinary nights. An ancient blue, the color of forgotten dreams. Each step carried a soft sound, not splash, not echo, but something like a sigh, released by the river itself. For the first time, Lyra felt the river watching her, not with fear, not with doubt, with hope. The forest that remembered nothing. The glowing path led her into the narrow gap between two impossibly old willow trees, their branches arching overhead, like trembling curtains of silver. Lyra stepped through, and the world changed. Silence greeted her first. Not the dead, heavy silence of the frozen river, but an empty quiet, as if no creature had passed through this grove. In 1,000 years, the trees stood still, with leaves made of glassy frost. Each leaf shimmered faintly, but none rustled, none moved, none breathed. This place, Lyra whispered, it feels forgotten. The river answered faintly inside her. Because it is. A soft wind rose, but the leaves did not stir. Branches did not sway. It was a wind carrying memory, not motion. Why bring me here? Lyra asked. The whisper drifted through her mind, like ripples crawling across frozen time. My name was born in this place. The stone that held the first flow. In the center of the silent grove stood a single stone altar, thin, tall, and cracked down the middle, as if lightning had once tried to carve its name into the world. Lines etched its surface, faint and winding, like the branching of a river, seen from far above. Some were glowing, most were dark. Lyra placed her hand on the stone. It was warm, unexpectedly warm. The crack down the middle glowed faintly, pulsing in the same rhythm as the child beneath the river. This is your memory, she breathed. No, the river corrected softly. This is yours now. Before she could speak, the warm stone shimmered beneath her touch. A faint vision unfurled, not sharp, not clear, but blurry like starlight seen through water. She saw a world of rivers that glowed like veins of fire, water that moved with purpose, tides that sang, currents that carried names as easily as leaves. And then she saw a hand, a human hand, smaller than hers, placing something into the river, carved token, a symbol, a name. The vision vanished, like a candle blown out. Lyra stumbled back. You had a guardian before me, she whispered. Not a guardian, the river murmured sadly. A friend. The word that once held the water. The wind whispered again, brushing past her ear, like a half-remembered song from a forgotten childhood. A faint syllable drifted on the breeze, not spoken aloud, not fully formed, but there. Rain! Lyra turned sharply. What was that? The trees remained silent. The altar glowed faintly. The wind curled around her again. Rennell! Her breath caught. That's a name. The river inside her trembled. A name. Lyra stepped closer to the altar. Is it yours? Silence. A deep, aching silence that felt like longing. Older than seasons. Older than mountains. Rennell! The breeze whispered again, almost pleading. Lyra pressed her palm to the crack in the stone. Is your name Rennell? The grove shook. Leaves of frost trembled. For the first time, in centuries. But the river's whisper came faintly, not in agreement, in pain. No. Lyra's chest tightened. Then whose name is it? The answer came slowly, full of sorrow. The one who gave me mine. The truth of the first flow. Visions rose around her, gentle as mist, sharp as memory. She saw a young boy, sitting by the river's edge, barefoot, smiling, tracing shapes in the mud. He sang to the river. He whispered to it. He named every bend of it, every pool, every stone. He carved the syllable Rennell into a small wooden charm and placed it into the water. The river's spirit, a small shimmering glow, responded. The vision shifted. The boy grew. Time passed. Then came a winter, so cold the stars hid. The boy whispered a new name, the river's true name, and the water surged in response. But before Lyra could hear it, the vision shattered. She gasped, dropping to her knees. "River, please, what was the name he gave you?" The whisper came faint, trembling. "I have forgotten." The cold wind rushed through the grove, scattering frost like shards of memory. But beneath the sorrow, Lyra felt something else. The river hadn't brought her here to find the name. It brought her here because the name was broken, a fragment missing from the world. She had to find it, somewhere beyond the grove, somewhere deeper than the river, somewhere older than the shadows. The call of the lower current. The glowing path flickered behind her, leading back toward the silent water. But another path shimmered before her, one carved not in water, but in air. A winding line of drifting frost rose from the altar and floated into the trees, drawing a shimmering arc toward the darkest part of the forest. Lyra stood. So the next piece is there. A faint pulse echoed inside her chest. Go. The river's whisper carried both fear and hope. Find the name I lost. Find the boy who carried it. Find the memory that must wake me. Lyra stepped onto the frost path, feeling it solidify beneath each footstep. Behind her, the glowing child beneath the water flickered softly, promised that it would wait. Ahead of her, the frost line snaked deeper into the ancient forest, toward a place untouched by water or wind. Lyra inhaled, and she followed, not knowing that what waited in the darkness ahead was not just memory, but the reason. The river had forgotten its name. The path made of falling winter, the frost line winding away from the altar, did not behave like ordinary ice. It drifted above the ground, floating gently through the air, like a trail of slow, falling snow that refused to land. Lyra followed it in silence. Each step she took turned the frost brighter, sharper, as though her presence gave it permission to exist. And the deeper she walked into the ancient forest, the more the world changed. The trees no longer looked like wood. Their trunks shimmered like glass. Their branches curled like frozen rivers. Their leaves as thin as shattered moonlight. Not a single living creature stirred. This was a place the world had forgotten. A place shaped by memory, but abandoned by time. And somewhere ahead, the name she sought waited for her, or hid from her. She couldn't yet tell which. The clearing where sound could not enter, the frost path led her into an impossibly still clearing, a perfect circle, carved into the forest, as if by a blade made of silence. When Lyra stepped inside, The air became heavy, not cold, just thick, dense, like the moment before a word is spoken, but never said. She touched her throat and gasped softly. Her breath made no sound. The clearing swallowed it entire. Not even the crunch of frost beneath her feet could be heard. This was a place where sound could not exist, a place where names could not survive. Lyra understood. This was where the river's name was broken. She moved toward the center, the stone of echoless memory. There, half buried in frost, stood a round, flat stone tablet, lines carved into its surface, curved like river currents, but some were cracked, others erased, and many simply missing, like the memory of a name, torn apart piece by piece. Lyra knelt beside it. As her fingers brushed the stone, a faint tremor passed through her, like touching a memory that had been asleep far too long. Images flickered across her thoughts. A young boy, bare feet in the water, kissed by sunlight, whispering to the river, as though it were his oldest friend. She felt his voice, but not his words. He was saying the river's true name, a name she almost heard, but then the vision cracked, like ice under pressure, and vanished. Lyra clenched her fists. "It's here," she whispered silently, her voice swallowed before it could reach her ears. "This is where your name was shattered." The stone pulsed faintly beneath her hands, a sorrowful, distant answer. The shadow of the first friend. A soft shape appeared at the edge of the clearing. Not a creature, not a ghost, a memory, trying to stand. The silhouette of a boy, wavering, transparent, as if made from reflected moonlight, took a step toward her. Lyra froze. His outline trembled, as though barely holding itself together. When he reached the clearing, his form flickered violently, chunks of him disappearing, as if the silence were devouring him. He couldn't exist here, but still he stepped closer, closer, until Lyra could see his eyes, sad, gentle, and familiar, in a way she could not explain. His lips moved soundlessly. He was trying to speak, trying to give her what he had once given the river, trying to say its name, but the clearing swallowed every syllable. Lyra reached toward him. He reached back. Their fingers nearly touched, and he shattered into drifting fragments of light. "Don't go!" She tried to scream, but the clearing devoured her voice. The fragments slowly reassembled. At the far edge of the circle, trembling, trying again, the boy pointed at the stone, then at Lyra, then at his own chest. 3 motions, 3 meanings. Remember, restore, return. The boy knelt and placed his hand over the center of the stone, the same gesture she had seen in the vision, at the altar. But when he tried to speak the name, the clearing tore his form apart again, scattering him into glittering shards. Lyra's chest tightened. The silence was killing the memory, the breath that broke the stillness. Sound, Lyra thought, is the only thing this place cannot hold. If sound could not exist here, Then the name could not survive here. She needed to break the silence. But how could she create sound? In a place that devoured it? She placed both hands on the stone. The frost around her dimmed slightly, as though the clearing were tightening its grip. Lyra inhaled slowly, deeply. She closed her eyes. And she did something the clearing was not meant to allow. She remembered a sound. The sound of the river flowing. The murmuring of water brushing past stones. The soft plip of droplets falling into the pool. The distant echo of the river's laughter. When it played with sunlight, she remembered it, not as noise, but as truth, and the clearing trembled. Cracks formed along the edges of the silent circle. Frost curled upward, lifting off the ground, as if caught in a sudden, impossible breeze. Lyra opened her eyes. I know this cannot silence a river, she thought. You cannot take what was meant to flow. She pressed her palms harder onto the stone. The clearing shook again. A soft vibration, barely a breath, barely real, whispered into existence. The first sound this place had heard in ages. A single, fragile, tremor. The boy who could finally speak. The memory of the boy reformed once more. But this time, he did not flicker. He did not break. He stepped forward, eyes wide, as if he too felt the silence weakening. Lyra held her breath. The boy placed his glowing hand over the broken center of the stone. He looked at her, and then, for the first time, Lyra heard his voice, soft, clear, full of endless love for the river he named. He spoke a single syllable, one piece of the name, a fragment small enough to fit inside a heartbeat. A-L. The grove blazed with light. Frost spiraled upward. The trees shuddered. The stone cracked open, not in destruction, but in awakening. Lyra staggered backward. The boy smiled, a gentle, knowing smile, and faded into a warm drift of silver. This time, he did not shatter. He simply returned to memory. As he vanished, his final whisper echoed faintly against the breaking silence. Find the rest. Lyra breathed out slowly. The clearing was no longer quiet. It hummed with unfinished truth. She knew now. The river's true name had many parts. Ayel was only the first, and the others were waiting somewhere deeper, beyond silence, beyond shadow, where forgotten rivers kept their last secrets. Lyra stood, and the frost path reappeared, stretching farther into the dark forest, inviting her onward. The forest where shadows held their breath. The frost path twisted deeper into the ancient wood, thinning until it resembled a thread of drifting moonlight. Lyra followed it quietly, her steps soft against the frozen soil. The air grew heavier the farther she walked, not with cold, but with memory. A hush settled over the world. Not silence, not danger, expectation. The trees around her bent inward, their branches arching like bowed heads, as if honoring the one who walked among them. Lyra touched her fingers to her chest. Ayel, she whispered. The single syllable of the river's true name she had recovered in the clearing of broken sound. The forest answered with a soft pulse of blue light rippling across the bark of the oldest trees. Yell. A beginning, but not a full truth. Not yet. The stream that could not flow. The frost path ended suddenly at the bank of a narrow stream. Or what had once been a stream. Now it lay frozen in mid-motion, as if the water had tried to leap over a stone and time had stopped halfway. A drop hovered in the air, locked in crystal stillness. A ripple was trapped against a branch, curved like a ripple carved from glass. Lyra stepped beside the frozen current. "This part of the river," she murmured. It tried to run. A soft wind passed through her hair. Not natural wind, but the faint memory of flow. Lyra knelt and touched the drop suspended in the air. Warmth pulsed beneath her fingers. A whisper rose gently. "Finish what he began." The voice wasn't the river. It wasn't the child beneath the water. It was older, fainter. A woman's voice, woven from memory and regret. The guardian who came before her, perhaps. Or the river's first friend. Lyra closed her eyes. "Tell me what I must do." The whisper swirled around her like drifting water. "The name has 3 parts. You hold the first. The second sleeps in the place where water once learned to rise." The suspended droplet flickered, then fell. It struck the ground with a soft chime, like glass turning to breath. The stream shifted, not flowing, but trembling, waiting. Lyra stood. "I'll find it." The stone stair that led downward. The frozen stream curved into the roots of an enormous tree. A tree so old its bark had turned silver, its trunk so wide it could have held a small village inside. At the base of the tree, roots curled inward, forming a natural archway. Steps descended beneath them. Steps carved not by human hands but by centuries of flowing water that had once rushed here freely. Now the steps were dry, still, waiting. Lyra descended. The deeper she went, the warmer the air became, as if she were walking not into earth, but into the memory of a warm spring morning. At the bottom of the stair lay a cavern lit from within. The walls glowed faintly, reflecting ribbons of silver-blue light. And in the center, hovering above a pool that was not water, was a shape, a swirl of luminous mist, slowly turning like a sleeping whirlpool. The second piece of the name. The whirlpool that remembered sky. The mist turned as Lyra approached, shaping itself into a spiraling form. A tiny cyclone of starlight, spinning ever so slowly. Lyra reached toward it. It recoiled, not in fear but in longing. "Are you part of the river's name?" she asked softly. The spiral pulsed. "Yes." "And I must earn you," she whispered. The whirlpool answered by projecting a faint image across the stone floor. A memory replayed through shimmering droplets. Lyra watched, water rushing upward over rocks, spray leaping toward sunlight, children laughing as they tried to climb the rapids. A boy, the same boy, placing his hands against the current, smiling as if greeting a friend. Then darkness, a storm, a freezing wind, the stream falling silent. Lyra pressed a hand to her heart. You used to rise, she whispered. You weren't just a river. You climbed. The whirlpool pulsed gently again. Then the cavern trembled. A wave of air, cold and sharp, swept into the chamber. The darkness she had felt earlier in the river, the presence hunting the river's spirit, slid into the cavern like a shadow given breath. Lyra stepped back. The shadow grew taller, stretching across the ceiling like ink poured into air. Eyes glimmered in the void, pale, hollow, searching the whirlpool with desperate hunger. No, Lyra cried. You can't take this memory. The shadow struck. The struggle against UN name. Dark tendrils lashed toward the whirlpool. Lyra leapt between them, the air cracking with cold. Her hands burned with frost as she pushed against the shadow's weight. It wasn't solid. It wasn't alive. It was forgetting made flesh, the force that eroded memory, the darkness that swallowed names. It wanted the whirlpool because it wanted the river to stay silent. Stop! She gasped, her knees buckling from the force. The whirlpool shimmered beside her, its pulsing rhythm weakening. Lyra pressed one palm against the icy floor, the other toward the shadow. Flow is movement. Memory is movement. You cannot stop what was born to rise. Her voice echoed sharply. Real sound, living sound, bouncing off the walls of the cavern. The shadow recoiled. Sound heard it. Lyra took a trembling breath, and she spoke the syllable she knew. Ael. The name rang like a bell. The cavern blazed with silver blue light. The whirlpool flared alive. A second syllable blossomed from its center. Rin. The light rushed into Lyra's chest. She gasped, feeling the new syllable burn like warm water in her lungs. El. Rin. Two pieces of the river's true name. The shadow shrieked silently, a soundless ripple, and fled back into the darkness. For now, the river that began to remember. Lyra ascended the stair, carrying the second syllable like a flame protected in cupped hands. When she reached the forest, the world had changed again. The trees no longer stood still. Leaves trembled. Branches quivered. The air shimmered faintly, as if the forest itself remembered wind. The frozen stream at her side cracked, sending a whisper of water trembling through the air. Not flowing, not yet, but breathing. Lyra returned to the river's center, where the child of water still slept beneath the surface. The glow beneath her feet brightened. You found it, the river whispered, its voice stronger now. A thread woven with hope and memory. Yes, she murmured, but the name has one part left. The river pulsed. The last syllable lies in the deepest place, where I was born. Lyra looked into the river's dark depths. The spring, she whispered, the place you first awoke. The river answered with a soft shimmer. Yes, the spring that never stopped singing. Lyra walked upstream, following the rhythm of faint vibrations the river now emitted with every half-breath of flow. The forest thinned. The land sloped upward, and at last she found it, a small pool nestled between ancient stones. The water was perfectly still, yet its center glowed with a rhythm older than any moon. Lyra knelt beside it. "This is where you were born," she murmured. The pool answered with a gentle ripple. Not on the surface, but beneath it. A shape rose slowly into view. Not a child, not a memory, a word, glowing beneath the water like a pearl carved from starlight. Dale, the third and final syllable. Lyra touched the surface. The word rose, wrapped in gentle warmth, and entered her chest like a final heartbeat. Yell, Rin, Dale. The full name struck through her like a river returning to its bed. She gasped. The forest shuddered. The sky brightened. And the water, for the first time since the beginning of her journey, flowed. The return of the river. Lyra raced back to the river's center. Water rushed around her, lifting her, carrying her with gentle strength. The child beneath the surface opened its eyes. Bright, clear, alive. Lyra placed her hand over the water, and with a voice steady and full of reverence, she spoke the name the world had forgotten. Rindale. The river exploded with light. Not violent light, but blooming, awakening, soft as sunrise on new snow. The return of the river. Lyra raced back to the river's center. Water rushed around her, lifting her, carrying her with gentle strength. The child beneath the surface opened its eyes. Bright, clear, alive. Lyra placed her hand over the water, and with a voice steady and full of reverence, she spoke the name the world had forgotten. Rindale. The river exploded with light. Not violent light, but blooming, awakening, soft as sunrise on new snow. The current surged. The village lanterns brightened. The waters lifted into shimmering arcs, then fell back with laughter. The river spirit rose above the surface, taking the shape of the glowing child, smiling with gratitude older than mountains. "Thank you," it whispered, its voice no longer fragile. "You remembered me." Lyra bowed her head, trembling. "I only returned what the world forgot." The spirit reached out and touched her forehead. Warmth spread through her. A blessing of flow, of movement, of endless memory. "You are my keeper now," the river said. "Not of water, but of names that must never be lost again." The night that became morning. The river settled into gentle motion, its glow dimming into soft moonlit blue. Villagers gathered along the banks, weeping with relief, watching as the current carried their hopes once more. Lyra stepped out of the water, her clothes shimmering with faint light, her heart still echoing with the river's name. Behind her, the river's spirit faded into the current. Not gone, but home. And as dawn warmed the horizon, Lyra whispered one final promise. "I won't let the world forget you again." The river answered, with a quiet, joyful ripple, the first sound of a new morning. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth.